Hey, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our weekly trade and tariff briefing. I'm Jim Fowler, Director of Business Advisory at WTC Utah, and I have the pleasure of facilitating today's conversation. I apologize, I'm having camera issues, but that's okay. I'm not much to look at anyway. Let me just introduce myself. I've started recently at WTC Utah. I'm really excited. I spent the last 11 years or so doing international business. I helped doTERRA develop and operate several new markets around the world. And then more recently, as a consultant, I've helped a number of other companies. But I was thrilled just earlier last month to join WTC Utah. And I've already had the pleasure of connecting with many of you and many other Utah companies uh, and doing some advisory work already. So it's been fun. I look forward to more. So if you have questions or problems we can help you solve, please don't hesitate to reach out. Let's get in touch. If you're here for the first time, this weekly webinar series is intended to provide you with the latest information about trade and tariffs. You can view previous webinars on our YouTube channel and find updates to our tariff dashboard on our website, which we will link in the chat for you. Today, we're really excited to hear first from Ben Kolendar, Chief of Staff at World Trade Center Utah, who's going to update us about the latest and greatest around trade and tariffs and the tariff dashboard. And then he's going to hand it off to our friend Derek Kitchen, who is former SVP of the Exim Bank and Utah State Senator. So great lineup today. Well, Ben, I'll hand it off to you.
Great. Thanks, Jim. Going to share my screen and go through a couple of high-level items first. Whoops. Can you all see that? Is that the Supreme Court homepage you're all seeing? Great.
Yes.
It was a little tricky on that share. So, first off, again, we did not see a Supreme Court decision today. We did not anticipate seeing a Supreme Court decision today. This is the biggest question we get is about the Supreme Court. And so just want to bring up the calendar and review that quickly before we dive into the dashboard. The first potential day we look at argument and non-argument days is the 20th. So this coming Friday, a week from today, is the first potential day we may see a decision, followed by a series of days the following week. The 23rd, 24th, 25th, and 27th may also be dates that a decision is dropped. So something to keep an eye on relating to the Supreme Court. I'm going to move over to the poly market because, this is such a big thing is how the Supreme Court is going to decide what are the odds. Again, not because we want to encourage the world to bet, but because it's good sentiment of what people are guessing the Supreme Court's going to do. So, saw a little bit of a drop off earlier this week. Last week was pretty high. The week before was pretty high. We were seeing in the 30 to 33% range that the Supreme Court would rule in favor of Trump's tariffs. Last week was 30, this week, or last week was 33. This week is about 30, but it's been hovering somewhere here between 26 and 30. So it saw a little bit of a drop off in terms of odds and broke the trend that we've been seeing that the longer this goes out, like plays out, the higher the odds are that the Supreme Court is going to rule in favor of the Trump tariff. So something we'll keep an eye on, continue to update everyone on here on this webinar. And just for context, we were somewhere in this, up above 52% range or so, but right before the decision, we were as high as about 48% before oral arguments. So that was a big, drop off after the oral arguments, and we'll just continue to monitor what that looks like. Now on to our dashboard here for World Trade Center Utah. For those of you joining us for the first time, wtcutah.com/tariffs. You could go here to get a link to these webinars and share it with others who may be interested in the weekly updates on tariffs and what that looks like. And track these along with us on our dashboard as well. So the first update I have here is China. We're going to talk about China for just a moment in terms of There's a summit being held in China in early April where President Trump will be going to China. Ahead of that meeting, we saw some of the thawing in the relationship with the pause on tech export bans. So this is a good point of reflection for how this has gone in the past. And if you're doing business in China, this is a good way to maybe just keep an eye out for some past actions carrying through to the future. But ahead of the big milestone events, we often see a ratcheting up of rhetoric and potentially tariffs. So we saw this, in the last set of negotiations before the truce agreement, and so we'll continue to monitor that, and it's something to keep an eye out for. As this is maybe the calm before the storm, maybe nothing happens. We don't really know, but there has been a bit of a trend that these things ratchet up before discussions take place. What we did also see with regards to China is, and this is captured on our deals page if you aren't familiar with it, is we had a deal with Taiwan reached last month, but some additional measures have been included by Taiwan to further reduce barriers to trade for U.S. products entering Taiwan. So some details are on our deals page. A couple of other updates that are relevant. We don't have any formal documentation on this, but we have seen an announcement for a reduction in steel and aluminum tariffs just this morning and yesterday. This was released by the Financial Times. No formal documentation that we've seen just yet, just a notice that this is likely coming, and that is what we're seeing and hearing is like, this is probably tied to the midterm elections and some of the political pressures around inflation and some of the mixed popularity with tariffs. So we're going to scroll down and talk about Canada for a minute. There are a few things here on Canada. We capture it in a few different buckets here. One is important legislation, one is Canada specific, and one is that we're watching the scheduled joint review for USMCA. So this is important because the House voted 219 to 211 to pass a resolution to terminate tariffs on Canada. The resolution is likely to pass the Senate, but be vetoed by the president. So this is a ceremonial thing, but it's significant because we're starting to see some more dialogue around the House pushing back on the White House as it relates to the tariff posturing by the White House. So, um, and alongside Canada, and this is, a little more for the scheduled joint review for USMCA. Reuters reported this week that Trump is privately weighing pulling back on USMCA. So these, scheduled meetings for USMCA for the review takes place in July. So this may be some of the regular signaling we see, but something again to continue to monitor. This was, a White House official came out afterwards and said this is a baseless claim. So the White House is not acknowledging that, but Reuters did report that there's some speculation that that may be the case coming from the White House. Going to shift to um, South Korea for a second. So South Korea, this is just a brief update. We talked last week about how the parliament agreed to fast track a U.S. investment process so that it would be done on March 9th. So now they're saying this may even be the U.S. investment may even be further fast-tracked and be done by the end of February. So Korea further advancing their commitment in the U.S.-Korea trade deal. Moving down to Cuba and then India really quick. Cuba, we didn't really see too much action, but just it's something to keep an eye on, formal documentation updates in terms of if you're doing shipping oil to Cuba, you might be faced with the tariff. We went through some of the targeted countries last week. We won't do that again here, but India, and I know this is a long update, so thanks for your patience. And Derek, we're going to get to you in just a second, but The fact sheet was released by the White House with further details. I'm not going to go into the full set of details here because I've already been talking for a while, but you can find those details on our dashboard. Um, and so with that, I am going to stop sharing my screen and just say that it's great to have Derek here, and we really appreciate him joining us. Derek, we go way back from previous lives, but it's great to have you and all your international experience with XM Bank come and talk to Utah businesses. We get a lot of questions about XM Bank, with everything going on with Project Vault, companies looking to go international and do trade deals, and how XM Bank can play a role. And in this tariff climate environment, XM Bank is playing a key role in all of this, and it's our job at World Trade Center Utah to bring these services to the attention of our Utah businesses. So grateful that you could join us and talk about your experience with XM Bank and maybe share some perspectives about how Utah companies can benefit from XM.
Awesome. Ben, thank you so much, my friend. Really great to be with you today and all my World Trade Center friends. And I was just looking through the participant list here. There's a couple familiar names as well, and a lot of folks I haven't had a chance to connect with yet. So thanks for being here. For those of you who don't know, my name is Derek Kitchen. I live in Salt Lake City. I'm piping in today from Washington, D.C., where I'm doing a little bit of business here at the nation's capital, but back in Utah tomorrow. And excited to talk a little bit about Export-Import Bank. I'm really glad this conversation is happening right now, especially with the business climate as it is. As you all know, trade policy isn't as abstract as it once was. We're seeing it pop up all over the place. In procurement decisions, we're seeing elongated project timelines and increased costs, of course, on the capital front. And Exim Bank has a lot of tools that I think could be helpful for businesses, not just in Salt Lake and in the region, but throughout the West, especially as we look toward increasing critical minerals projects and um, advanced manufacturing and really positioning our region for the economy of the future. Um, so, as Ben mentioned, I served some time in the federal government, not as an inmate, excuse me, but as an appointee, kind of like Ben, and spent a number of years at the Export-Import Bank. I have a background in politics and public service. Served in the Utah legislature for a number of years in the state senate. And for those of you who I have had a chance to connect with, I run my own small business in downtown Salt Lake. It's a food and beverage establishment, a restaurant. And so I've had my own experience with increased costs as it relates to tariffs, given that I run a Mediterranean restaurant and we import a lot of our specialty ingredients. And so, it hits close to home for me. Trade policy impacts small business, medium business, and big business. And it's, one of those things that you just have to figure out how to preempt and plan around. And so glad to see these programs put together by World Trade Center and honored to be here today. So, just in the current trade environment, I really want to set the tone at the top here. As you all know, we're in a big moment of changing, the changing global market. The economy seems to be in a shift. And of course, we have policy coming out of the federal government that does seem to change from day to day, week to week, month to month. And so for businesses, we need to be on our toes right now. From a trade standpoint, over the last number of decades, as we've globalized, trade policy has been primarily about efficiency and cost, and just-in-time sort of approach to our supply chains. Uh, Depending on your industry, but kind of across the board, I'm seeing right now trade is more about resilience and security. And so we're seeing the policy not only at the federal level change, but some of our global allies adjusting their policy to match or compete with the United States. And so again, it's about security, supply chain security, national security, economic security, and resilience. Um, for those of you who are experiencing your first, blow as it relates to trade and tariffs, it's obvious that tariffs are a big it's a big important tool in the current administration, but they're blunt. Um, and the volatility at hand here is the risk in our supply chains. I think if you just look back to the early days of COVID, it demonstrated to us just how vulnerable the United States is as it relates to our supply chains. We saw some pretty serious shocks during the early days of the pandemic. And as the competition with China has heated up over the last couple of years, supply chain shocks are something that we all need to plan around and prepare for. And so in 2026 and looking into the future, capital is always key in business, but in order to secure capital investments, we need to have predictability. And so, the biggest cost for businesses isn't necessarily the tariff, but it is that sense of uncertainty. Here in Utah, we're growing fast. It's exciting, but it presents a number of, you know, challenges. We have increased energy demands and increasing costs. So construction is its own animal. Supply chains for, construction partners are one thing, and then of course, getting the zoning and, the local regs in line to meet the moment is another thing. As Utah continues to grow, we see an increased focus on advanced manufacturing. I think it's a great thing for us. It will position Utah nicely in the future economy, but we're not going to get there overnight on the advanced manufacturing side. And so I see a ton of potential, but we need to make sure that we have local and federal policy that match the moment. We're seeing a huge increase, as I mentioned, in energy, but also in data center needs. And so, as you all probably know, just from reading the local headlines, we're seeing a lot of investment there. It's a huge opportunity, but it does create challenges. Industrial development is, an important part of the future economy, especially in a place like Utah. But we got to take advantage of it and make sure that we have the tools available. So that's what I'm here to talk to you about today is federal tools that I think you all should be aware of. I won't spend too much time in the dirty details, but I do want to make sure that I'm able to put, Export-Import Bank on your radar. Just for background on Exim Bank, as we call it, it is about 94 years old. It is a New Deal era federal agency. It was stood up by Franklin Delano Roosevelt after the First War as a way to support our European allies in their reconstruction efforts. And so Exim Bank was primarily used in the 30s and 40s to invest and support Europe as they built their government buildings, roads, ports, airports, power plants, power transmission, all the important infrastructure that we need to have a modern economy. Exim Bank was stood up as America's primary tool to support our allies. In the years since, we've obviously moved beyond just supporting Europe, but now the bank is doing all kinds of really interesting work to support American companies to be competitive globally. So, in the past decade or so, Exim kind of picked up a bit of a reputation as being Boeing's bank. Maybe you've heard it referred to as Boeing's bank in the past. Um, it has supported Boeing a lot over the years, but as you may know, if you're in the aerospace or defense industries, there really are only two major producers of aircraft in the world. You got Airbus and Boeing. And so when it comes to supporting American industry, we want to see Boeing succeed. And so Boeing has become a big part of Exim Bank. But in the last couple of years, the board of directors at the agency has started to pivot the focus from, it'll always be focused on exports, but now in light of COVID-19 and some of the supply chain shocks that I've already mentioned, we've begun to realize that we have a lot of work to do to support domestic manufacturing. We've offshored a lot of our critical supplies to primarily Southeast Asia and a little bit in Latin America. But now is the time for the United States to shift gears, and you're seeing some new programming come out of that. One of the main programs at Export Import Bank is called Make More in America. And this is like I said, a domestic financing tool. And this is where we are able to help local domestic producers make the investment that they need to make in order to increase their export capacity, or if they have supply chain resilience efforts underway, Export-Import Bank can come in and help manufacturers make the investments that they need to make. Um, so Make More in America is, like I mentioned, it supports US-based manufacturing. It helps finance the facilities, but it can also help finance equipment. And then if you're doing small scale domestic manufacturing and you want to scale up, this program is the right tool for you, especially again, if there's a China competition angle here. Make More in America is designed for capital intensive industries. So this is heavy manufacturing, this is chips and semiconductors, nuclear power plants. They do a little bit, of course, on natural gas development if you're in that industry. And then, of course, any sort of trinket. If you're producing something that has a global market and you want to scale up your domestic manufacturing, this is a tool that you should be looking at. The nice thing about Make More in America is that it can be competitive with commercial financing. And so if you are working with a traditional lender, or even if you have, equity investors, and you need to scale up, you can look at the Export-Import Bank as a tool that you can incorporate into your capital stack. I think the bottom line with Make More in America that I want to leave you with is that this is about strengthening domestic production capacity. And it helps, from a sort of national security standpoint, it helps make sure that the United States isn't as exposed to supply chain shocks, not only here, but around the world. The other program that is really important and I think becoming more and more a focus of the Trump administration is what we call the China and Transformational Exports Program, CTEP. And just the short and sweet point on CTEP is that it is a program that's designed to support advanced tech, semiconductors, any renewable energy, critical minerals, not only mining, but processing. And there are 10 transformational export areas that are of interest to the US government that this program is designed for. So we're talking, aerospace, biotech, any of the life sciences, critical minerals, nuclear power. Like I said, there are 10, subsections that are really important to the agency and the US government at large. And so this program is designed to, again, directly compete with China and the People's Republic of China. So if you're working in an industry right now and you have the ability to directly compete with a product or a service that is primarily offered by China, I think Exim Bank is an agency that you should be cultivating a relationship with immediately. Again, this is all about supply chains, and there are a lot of federal tools that are currently available through, depends on your industry, of course, but through Commerce Department, through State Department, through Department of Energy and others. But Exim Bank is something that I think is a real valuable tool and oftentimes underutilized. Just a side note, Congress has authorized Exim Bank to lend up to $135 billion. It's an enormous lending cap. Right now, the agency, at my most recent look a couple weeks ago, they've only been exposed up to $35 billion. So they still have $100 billion in headroom. And the Trump administration, from what I can gather, is very eager to activate that capital. So we can talk more about that on the side if you'd like. Ben asked me to jump into Project Vault a little bit. Project Vault was announced a few weeks ago alongside the Critical Minerals Ministerial, which was put together by the U.S. Department of State. And in a nutshell, this is a $10 billion backed public-private partnership. It's operating like a corporation. And it's identified 60 or so critical minerals, critical materials that are on the USGS list of priority materials in the United States. And so it's designed to support those 60 or so critical minerals that the US government is really focused on right now. This is a subscription-based model where it's a demand-driven type dynamic by the manufacturers. But if you are a member or if you subscribe to this, then you get to have access to the stockpile that is going to be created here on critical minerals. So it's a little different from the National Defense Stockpile, which is obviously defense focused. Um, with Project Vault, this is primarily focused on commercial resilience. And, I know Ben has been talking about this as a concept for a long time. I'm sure he was thrilled to see the big guys get involved and actually take this and run because it's a really important opportunity for the United States, especially as we look to beef up our competition with China. Uh, in Utah, this is super relevant for any energy project, anything related to industrial inputs. If you're doing advanced manufacturing of any type, this is going to be an important new tool for you. And if you're building infrastructure or are in the construction supply chain at any level, Project Vault is something that you should pay attention to. At the end of the day, this is essentially a supply chain resilience insurance program that's structured through creating long-term commitments and a group buying effort that will allow us to get competitive pricing on these important minerals. There is an important nuance here because right now the United States is not going to be able to immediately decouple from China or any other, sovereign partner that we're engaged with right now. But this Project Vault does give us an opportunity to build in a buffer while we continue to focus on diversification here in the United States, because it's going to take a decade or so for us to really get to where we need to be. So the most important part right now is for you as business owners and operators and folks that are, making key decisions in your industry and in your sectors. It's how do you actually engage with the bank? So I would first encourage you to, take a look at EXIM's website, exim.gov. As I mentioned earlier, that stands for Export-Import Bank, and identify where you fit into the bank's mission. As I mentioned earlier, EXIM generally support any projects that are jobs focused. If you're going to either reinforce your commitment to the existing jobs or look at growing your employee base, already you're an interesting fit for the agency. If you have any export nexus at any level, Exim Bank is interested in you already. And then if you have, more capital intensive financing needs, this is an important, agency for you to look at because again, right now they have over $100 billion in financing headroom. So as you look to engage with the Export-Import Bank, you're going to want to make sure that you have a business plan and some projected revenue. Again, the bank does not get involved in pre-rev projects. Typically, there are a few exceptions, but they would require approval from the board of directors, and they just don't like to do it because, again, Exim Bank is using tax dollars. So, me and you, we are the backstop for the agency, and so the agency does have what they call a reasonable assurance of repayment standard. Basically, if you borrow money from the bank, you got to be able to prove that you are capable of paying it back. Just as a fun fact, side note on Exim Bank. Since 1992, it has delivered a return to the U.S. Treasury of about $9 billion. So, in the grand scheme of the federal budget, it's not that much money, but it is the only agency that has created a profit for the American taxpayer. And so it's a really interesting agency just from that standpoint. So, outside of just sort of, feeling out your own viability with the agency, your next step would be to submit a letter of interest. The bank has a number of regional offices. I would be happy to connect any of you with the regional office that represents Utah or the Intermountain West, broadly speaking. But a letter of interest would be the very first important step. You outline the high level overview of your project, the scope, financing needs, what kind of exports you're going to be doing here. And then they will review that, and it will be the signal of serious engagement for the bank. The bank only has about 370 employees and a huge and growing, book of business right now. And so, they do have some timelines that are, anywhere between 4 and 8 months for review and approval. So I would recommend if you have an interest in Exim Bank to start sooner than later. But the letter of interest is, essentially the formal invitation for Exim to assess whether your project fits the mandate, and then they'll go through their internal review, and then you could be well on your way. Um, I guess I'll just sort of wrap up here by saying, I've been inside the federal government, I've been inside the bank. Um, these reviews are complex. They will go through a very comprehensive underwriting review. There will be a fair amount of back and forth within the project engineers and again the underwriters and folks in leadership in the front office to make sure not only do they meet the sort of statutory requirement mapped out by Congress, but that it also matches the interests and focus of the administration. And so there are a lot of things that need to align, but there is a big appetite right now to engage, and I think Utah has the focus of the federal government, given how quickly we're growing, and again the focus on critical minerals. So I would encourage you to take a look at the bank. They do have tools that are totally underutilized, and I think, there's a lot of opportunity for Utah businesses to step into the game a little bit more directly. And so, as I wrap up my remarks here, just wanted to say, trade policy is going to keep evolving. We've got 3 more years of Trump. Um, so I would say just buckle up. Tariffs may shift, they may not, but global dynamics most certainly are going to continue to change as our world changes. Um, Institutions like the Export-Import Bank, they're designed to stabilize growth and de-risk strategic capital investment. And so, if you're looking at making a big investment or have needs, this is the agency that you should be looking at. We have in Utah, we have not only the growth coming, we have developable land, we have a pretty well-equipped workforce. And, if you look at the legislature, the governor, and the business community, we've got a lot of ambition in Utah. And so the question here is whether or not we are able to meaningfully align our ambition and all of our assets with the tools that the federal government has. And I think that's where World Trade Center comes in and is a huge resource for all of us. And so I guess with that, I'll open it up to Q&A and would be happy to field any questions that you all have.
I've got a quick question, Derek. Are there any restrictions around countries, whether you're exporting to a target market or importing from a country, in terms of Exim Bank's mandate?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, Exim is designed to de-risk projects. So if there is political instability, let's say, I don't know, Venezuela, for example, or Nicaragua, there are opportunities for Exim Bank to help de-risk your engagements with these higher risk countries. That being said, there are countries that are on a no lend list, Argentina being one of them, just given their financial situation. As I alluded to earlier, there's a reasonable assurance of repayment that must be met so that the taxpayer is not left holding the bag here. And so there are a couple of countries that are off the list right now. The agency does periodic reviews of that list. I want to say 2 or 3 times a year, just to, they follow the news, the headlines, they look at the budgets of each of these countries, make sure that, they're investable and that they're, again, that standard of repayment is met. But by and large, the agency exists to help de-risk American companies on the global market.
Right? It's like someone's looking for your email. So, are you the main point of contact for if companies want to reach out to Exim Bank?
First of all, yes. I mean, I'm not with the agency formally any longer, but I am able to help in my personal capacity and would be proud to do that, especially with Utah companies. So I know Ben just put it in the chat. I also dropped my email in the chat, so feel free to reach out and would be happy to have a deeper dive based on your individual needs.
Okay, great. And there are some links in the chat as well that we put there just to provide direct information about some of the programs that Derek mentioned. Great. looks like we're about out of time here. So love the content here, Derek. Thank you so much for sharing that. Ben, really appreciate your input. It's been a pleasure talking with you guys and learning from you. So we will wrap up. Thank you everyone for tuning in. If anyone has any questions, please reach out. And feel free to visit our website. We'll continue to update the tariff dashboard. And if you want to know about upcoming events, you can go to our website and find those listed there. We look forward to seeing everybody next Friday. So thanks again for your time.
Thanks, everyone.